How often do you think about the Oscars? About how many Oscar-winning films there are and how many you've seen? Yeah, there's a few famous Oscar-winning films that we've all seen. You know, The Godfather and Lord of the Rings and Titanic. I'm King of the World, all that stuff. But the Oscars have been running since 1927. There are currently over 1,000 films, feature-length films, which have won an Oscar. How many have you seen? I did the numbers for myself. It's not many, and I consider myself quite a movie buff. So here then is the premise of this podcast. Every episode, I and a rotating cast of two guests will randomly select one of the 1,000 films that have won an Oscar, watch it, and talk about it, with the only requirement being that one of the three people on each episode has to have never seen the movie before we talk about it. That will get difficult with Star Wars. Please note that our coverage of a movie does not constitute an endorsement of it. My least favorite movie of 2016, David Ayer's Suicide Squad, won an Oscar for Best Makeup, while my favorite movie of 2016, The Handmaiden, wasn't even nominated for anything. Please also note that our coverage of a movie is not a blanket endorsement of any or all of the people involved in it. A lot of terrible people have won Oscars. Kevin Spacey won an Oscar 20 years before he was outed as an abuser, and Roman Polanski won one 20 years after. But every film, good, bad, or in many cases mediocre, that has won an Oscar is an important part of film history just for being there. And they all, on some level, deserve a tiny bit of consideration, even if that consideration ends up concluding that it's garbage. And with all of that in mind, I'm your host, as always, Ellie McConaughey, and with me today is Liz.
Hi, I am a librarian and a lover of cinema and books. I joke that I have more of both than I can actually ever watch or read.
Ideal.
Yeah, I mean, although it's a problem because I'm a librarian, so I bring home library books, so it's like, all right, when am I going to read the books that I bought? And then I just go, oh, that's the great part, you kind of can't.
My partner, who just left, is a knitter. Like, he writes knitting patterns for a living. And he introduced me to a term called stable. It refers to yarn stashes in the knitting community, but I've officially applied it to my books, my movies, and to my miniature painting backlog. Stash acquired beyond life expectancy.
Yeah.
And also joining us today is Callie.
Hi, my name is Callie. I am a reader, a writer who has not published anything except unless you like AO3. I have stuff on AO3.
You know,
If that counts.
I've been reading AO3, but I'm just going to leave it there. People need to know what I'm reading.
I read The Sisters of Dorley on AO3, if you know what that is. Congrats on your transition. If you don't look it up.
I read garbage. I'm a raccoon. I read garbage.
Hey, raccoons are great and very helpful to society.
Yes, I have to consume the garbage because no one else will.
And we are here today to not talk about garbage. We are, in fact, here today to talk about Thelma and Louise, the 1991 Ridley Scott film that won Best Original Screenplay
Woo!
at the 64th Academy Awards and was also nominated for Best Director and Best Actress twice.
Question, would we consider this Ridley Scott's last truly great film? I mean, he's had good films since then. I just can't think of any that have reached the level of Thelma and Louise.
The Alien films? I haven't seen them because I'm a parent. I don't do aliens, but
I do. Alien was over a decade before this.
Yeah.
the sequels?
He didn't direct those.
He did not direct Aliens or Alien 3. I'm getting to be an Alien Covenant defender. I don't like what that says about me. I don't know. I really liked The Last Duel, which is actually working on similar themes. I know that's not a super popular opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I like The Martian.
Yeah.
The Kingdom of Heaven's director's cut is incredible, but
American Gangster is good as well. He's already such a spotty filmmaker, in my opinion, and I just feel like his highest highs are far behind him. I guess would be the best way to put it.
He is also, I'm not gonna, he did also direct a film called White Squall, which I'm not gonna tell everyone why why that film is now weirdly famous because
Yep.
the YouTube algorithm will fucking kill me.
I know that. I know why, Ellie.
Liz knows.
I'm not.
I'll explain after the recording, Callie.
Yep.
I'm gonna live in blissful ignorance.
And is it his last great film? I mean, like,
The Martian was my first introduction to Ridley Scott, I think.
Oh wow.
that's the Martian's like I'm not. The Martian was kind of like at the end of a very long dry period for him. You know, we had Prometheus, which I have not come around on. I'm sorry.
You're correct, not. Prometheus is not good.
The Counselor, which is impressively unhinged but not actually good. The end point that I was driving at by bringing up Mr. Ridley is I don't like pick movies based on timing. Like I don't go in or rephrase. I don't like go through all the Oscar winning films and go, okay, I'm gonna pick that one because it's timely. I do the random rolls, and when this one came up, I'm like, hey, isn't this like the week Gladiator II comes out? And it is.
Oh yeah.
Well, there you go.
You know, it is, though, to be fair, audience, it is October 28th as we record this, so, you know, a hot minute away.
Mm-hmm.
I need to see the first one.
Imagine the movie, you know what, we were joking earlier about imagining movies. Imagine the movie conjured up by the word gladiator. You're mostly there. I don't actually like Gladiator very much.
Yeah.
You see, you can tell I wasn't choosing the ratings, or else I'd have just picked Gladiator.
I need to just put that. I still need to put it on my desk movies to watch before I go through desk store list, though.
Fair enough.
It feels like it's an important movie.
Ridley Scott is an inconsistent but important filmmaker.
Mhm.
I'm looking what else he directed after The Last Duel. House of Gucci, also impressively insane, but not actually good. I should probably get around to watching the director's cut of Napoleon.
I need to see Napoleon, period. I've been looking forward to it. I just
No, you don't.
I'll report back about the director's cut, but the theatrical cut, I don't know, the joke I made walking out of it is like, man, I bet when they put the hour and change they cut out of that back in, that movie's gonna rule.
Oh God.
I didn't like Napoleon either.
Aw.
Oh, I just wanted to say, piggybacking on your opinion of Gladiator, that was nominated the same year we had Traffic and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I believe.
Ooh.
Two, I believe Time is vindicated as much better films. And I remember that year being very angry because I was a big Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon fan, and I was like, this is bullshit, it didn't win.
I mean, like, one of the things that's sort of fascinating about going back over the Oscars in retrospect is you do wind up smacking head on into movies that, you know, that won that year because they were hot shit. And then, like, the Artist is my favorite example. Like, who the fuck has thought about The Artist in the last 10 years? No one.
I have like twice, but that's because somebody has mentioned it in terms of the Oscars.
Precisely. It is known primarily as, didn't that movie win a bunch of Oscars for some reason?
Because it was a love letter to Hollywood and the Oscars.
And Hollywood does love jerking itself off.
Yeah.
As I sit here in a podcast devoted to Hollywood's biggest instance of jerking itself off. What am I doing with my life?
I do love that the Oscars were invented as a way to prevent unionization in the industry, and now the film industry is one of the most unionized industries in the country, so it's like, well, look at that. The Oscars did not succeed in its original for its original purpose.
Look who has egg on their face.
Well, I mean, hey, I think the best way Ellie and I have discussed this to look at the Oscars as a whole is to remember that it is ultimately a producer's award show.
Mm-hmm.
All of the movie, like, these are studio heads and companies trying to submit these films. It's not directors nominating other directors like the Guild Awards.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, it's all political in a way, but it's one where it's like, guys,
it's popularity contest.
Kind of, yes. It's a campaigning contest, but I talk about this when people wonder why certain animated films aren't nominated for Best Animated Feature. I could do an entire program on that. But one of the reasons we don't see a lot of smaller animated movies get nominated is, again, this is a producer's awards show. Who has a bigger war chest to campaign? It's not these small movies. So we also have to keep that in mind when we think about, like, who wins what. Is, you know, what studio is having a really good year and had a good war chest to push these films.
There's a new animated film coming out. I'm very curious to see if it wins.
Disney is actually weirdly relevant to to this year at the Oscars, to the 64th Academy Awards, because this is the year that Beauty and the Beast got nominated for Best Picture.
Yes, and people flipped out. As an animation person, people flipped out over this. They were incredibly like, this sullies the Best Picture.
Audacity.
Yeah, which I'm gonna say this, like, 91's a strong year, but like Beauty and the Beast is one of Disney's best films, and I actually think had every right to be there on that slate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will say that this is actually one of the years where I feel like the Academy hit it better than they usually do. You know, I have
Mm-hmm.
some complicated thoughts on Silence of the Lambs as a trans woman. But you know, it's Silence of the Lambs is a great film. Fisher King's a great film. But Thelma and Louise is a great film. It's also a film that I feel like has lasted very, very long. You know, I was like sitting here, you know, before I posted the link to the Riverside where we're recording this. And I was like, okay, you can make one Marge on the Lamb reference, and that's it. So Thelma and Louise is a movie that has lasted. It's a movie that I feel like is pretty iconic in a lot of way, in a way that a lot of films from, you know, the early, from this era of the Oscars really aren't. You know, you ever hear anyone, my friends, of Driving Miss Daisy, like not the plot of Driving,
Derisively, yes.
the actual like content of the film. I've never seen it.
I haven't.
Oh wait, yes,
I've heard of the play, but
I have seen Driving Miss Daisy. Oh,
The last time I heard Driving Miss Daisy reference was when Green Book beat Black Klansman for Best Picture, and Spike Lee, who clearly had a couple of glasses of champagne, just said, "Man, every time I have a movie nominated, they give it to some white person driving a car or something." But it was basically going like, "Man, first Driving Miss Daisy beats Do the Right Thing, and now this bullshit." Which, correct, Spike, correct.
mm-hmm.
yes.
And the year before this was Dances with Wolves year.
Ooh.
Oof.
We'll get there one day.
Ah.
That's certainly a film, a movie even. Anyway,
A movie even.
I probably should have thrown a content warning up front, but I'll throw it in now. You know, we're going to talk about the plot of Thelma and Louise. Audience, talking about the attempted sexual assault in the movie is pretty much like unavoidable. It's basically the inciting incident.
Yep. And
Murder.
the idea of sexual assault is something that kind of is hinted at in other parts of the film as well.
It's really interesting to me because I was like watching it, I'm taking my notes, and I actually have a note in here that like basically every major male character, with the possible exception of Louise's boyfriend Jimmy,
Michael Masden, correct?
Michael Masden, yeah. Is his name Jimmy? Let me see.
I think his name's Jimmy. Hang on.
He's not in the movie a whole lot. Anyway, yes, he is Jimmy.
Yeah.
Every one of them is like a different flavor of kind of like shitty guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Brad Pitt. Speaking of shitty people,
Yeah.
is like the kind of like manipulative user. I feel like Harvey Keitel's an okay person, but you know, ACAB, and I think the movie is aware ACAB because he like openly threatens to abuse his power just to fuck with Brad Pitt.
Although, honestly, he also is protecting those women, so it's like, you're on thin ice. Like, ACAB, but you're on thin ice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think what is interesting about Harvey Keitel's character, so just a little background, you know, I kind of, when I was a teen, I started getting into like my baby feminist phase, and Thelma and Louise was a movie I watched when I was like 14 or so, in a fairly formative film for me. But like, you know, and it's interesting to watch this film as a teenager, and then as you get older and you have a little bit more nuance, you get to see the different shades of a lot of the characters in this film. And Harvey Keitel's character is interesting because it kind of plays into the ending of this film, where it's ultimately he does understand why Thelma and Louise did what they did. He understands their plight. He understands that these aren't criminals. These were women trying to protect themselves from not just an abuser, but a society that would not really see them as victims.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, since he is a part of the system itself, he can't really protect them and he can't save them. And that is what I think something that factors into the character's decision at the end of the movie, just to be like, let's just keep going, because ultimately they know the system as it exists now is never going to be one that serves them.
Mm-hmm. You know, I referenced Marge on the Lamb a minute ago, and it's interesting because like one of the things that different about this film than the joke that they steal shot for shot from this movie is like, Thelma and Louise drive the car off the edge of the Grand Canyon, fade to white, very famous ending. Not this movie's 30 years old, and it's an incredibly famous ending.
Yeah.
I'm not spoiling anything. Leave me alone. And it struck me that, like, man, I like that it ends without seeing. Obviously, they're not gonna like physically make it. That's not like possible. But it's like it's interesting that they don't show them crash. It's not like the movie's averse to showing crashes. They just had a very extended car chase, very good car chase. Ridley Scott is a good director. Hot take of 2024.
He can be.
I think he's always a good director. I just think his grasp of material isn't always the best. I think all of his movies, his best movies and his worst movies are like really big swings.
Okay.
And he's at his worst when he's like Robin Hood is my example. Like, it's just kind of boring.
Well, I mean, I'll let you finish your thought about the end of the film, and then I'll jump in, or I'll see if you actually are kind of get where I think. So
it's just like if you take the film, which I suspect we must, as like this kind of like feminist story, it's interesting that they don't show them fall because, like, it maybe there isn't a place for them to land now, but maybe there could be someday, is I guess the logic train that I'm flying to that final shot.
Well, that's kind of how I saw it. So when I was in college, we discussed the film, and there were some people who just said, like, how is it an empowering film that they choose death? And I kind of brought up, I'm like, well, because they knew that they wouldn't be treated fairly. They would just be seen as two crazy women that snapped and killed a man. Like, there's a line at the beginning of the film where Thelma's like, shouldn't we just go to the police? And Louise just says, everyone in the bar saw you dancing with that man. What do you think they're going to think? We don't live in a world where you're going to be listened to. And it's like, yeah, ouch, correct. Again, formative film for like little teen me, because just going like, oh no, this is correct. Because, I mean, my gosh, like, if you pay attention to stories, like how women are portrayed, like, this was around the time of the Lewinsky case, a little afterwards for me, and a 22-year-old woman who definitely was in a very power imbalanced situation was made to be the punchline. Rather than, I mean, I wouldn't call her a full-on victim because at the end of the day, she was an adult and made decisions. But also why are we making her a punchline when clearly the scumbag here is the president of the United States? But I digress. Like, I always saw that ending, again, they went to where they're free, and unfortunately, in the society that they lived in and that we live in, they can't find freedom in the justice system. But also, I think there's this idea of, we have this film that's about women, going on a crime spree, but also this idea of women striking back and kind of finding empowerment in themselves. I think if they were to show the actual crash and the carnage, I think that would kind of be a slap in the face to the rest of the film.
I will say that an even better comparison is 9 weeks after this movie opened, some dickhead named George H.W. Bush nominated Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court.
Oh, God.
Oh.
Don't make me think about the Supreme Court right now. Please don't.
Oh no.
Yeah, we don't. With this hot take, this podcast is anti-Clarence Thomas.
I'm anti-Supreme Court.
I'm getting there.
Not hard to.
It's also like, there's a clip going around right now, like doing the rounds on Twitter, October 28th. So, like, by the time this episode hits, audience, probably not going to be still relevant. Don't jump at me. Of Saoirse Ronan in like an interview where, there's like 3 other guys and they're kind of joking about like who thinks about where their phone is when you're in like a life or death situation. And she sort of ends up having to shout over them, well, women have to think about that all the time. And it sort of struck me, I guess, like halfway through the movie. And this is the first time I've watched this movie since transitioning.
Well, Anna Kendrick, too, just came out about her relationship. I haven't read any of the articles. I will admit I haven't read any of the articles about it, but Anna Kendrick just came out about the abusive relationship that she was in. So It is very timely that we picked this one.
I mean, I feel like I referenced Brad Pitt and his ongoing
piece of shit nature.
Yeah.
There's when all of your children are starting to drop your last name, maybe it's not your wife poisoning the kids. Maybe it's you.
Yeah, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
I was about to make that one myself.
What's actually, I feel like, kind of unfortunate, and we're saying that it's relevant because Anna Kendrick just came out about her abusive relationship, and I was just thinking, like, but if we did this like 6 months ago, it would be about, well, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. If we did it 6 months before that, it would be about Marilyn Manson,
Mm,
Evan Rachel Wood. If we did that 6 months before that, it would be Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
Amber Heard, yep.
There's always one.
somebody.
Exactly. It's just exhausting.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. Well, and it's actually something I appreciate about this movie. I rewatched it like 3 or so years ago. Is that for the most part the men, well, a lot, well, this I've joked that this movie is like a men ain't shit movie, but like they're not cartoonishly evil like you would see in like a Lifetime film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm even blanking. What was the guy's name? Harlan. He's very charming, and like when you're young and you're taught about sexual assault, we're often taught about it as you're walking home and some guy jumps out of an alley and pulls you in. We are
Mm-hmm.
not taught, or I certainly wasn't. I mean, I
How about the Harlans?
yeah, I was. I mean, again, I don't know how old you are. I am almost 40 years old. I am from Massachusetts.
32.
Yeah, I'm from Massachusetts, but we grew up in the age where, stranger danger still happened. But like most of what we were taught in class or self-defense, it was what if someone grabs you, not what if the person you are at a club or the person you're on a date with suddenly doesn't take no for an answer and you don't have a knife on you. You don't have mace. You're like, I thought we were just having a fun time. I didn't think this was going to turn violent. But it's like, if you ask a lot of, not just women, femmes, men, masked people, a lot of people who are victims of assault, it is not the random person that grabbed him at the alley. It's a person who is at a party or a person they knew and trusted or had some level of trust with that just didn't take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not even as violent as it's portrayed in the film. It's, I think, for a mainstream movie to depict it it was fairly kind of sadly groundbreaking at the time, because it's like it's just a film reflecting the far more common instance of rape.
I mean, like, so sexual assault and film has an extremely long and extremely unpleasant history.
We could use the term problematic.
I mean, I don't want to use the term problematic because, like, sometimes it's, I just reference the fact that I'm a fan of The Last Duel. I think it's a good movie. I think it does it really well, and people were describing that film regularly as like Rashomon but with rape. And what struck me about that is, like, I get what you're saying. There's rape in Rashomon.
Do you not know the plot of Rashomon?
It's a pretty major plot point.
Wait, I have never heard someone describe The Last Duel as Rashomon with rape, but I'm like, you didn't watch Rashomon, did you?
Rashomon's one of those movies that I feel like a lot of people don't actually watch.
I've never seen either of them.
Oh, you should watch Rashomon.
You should watch Rashomon. In fact, if someone recommends a Kurosawa film to you, just go see it. Don't pass go.
I'll just go add that to my best door list.
Okay.
It's also a short story that is still in print. You can read it.
Mm-hmm. Your Callie audience is also supplying our has not watched it before this viewing requirement. So Liz and I have, like, I first saw this film, I want to say like 18.
I saw it last night at the age of 32, almost and a half.
So yeah, different age groups to see it. It was kind of different seeing it the first time. I don't want to say like as a woman, because like there's a lot of complicated stuff on whether that statement is accurate, referring back to the, explaining gender issues to cis people versus explaining them to trans people joke. But like the first time I've ever been outside perceived as a woman, the first time I've seen it since then, and like I don't know, like the second or third time I ever went out someplace that wasn't like my local town as a woman, like when I went to New York City, I got groped on the subway. So,
Oof.
I get it. I get the film.
Yeah.
I mean, I always got it. I don't want to like front that I ever sympathized with any of the shitty dudes in this movie. Do we think that there's any of these dudes, Harvey Keitel, ACAB aside, how do we feel about Jimmy?
He's complicated.
He's trying his best, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He is a guy who doesn't, he's stuck in a weird poverty cycle and doesn't know what to make of his life, and he wants Louise to be. No, not Louise. Wait, I get him mixed up, and I don't mean to, and I apologize.
No, Louise is correct.
Okay, cool. We're gonna go back a half second there then. He's stuck in a poverty cycle. He doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, and because he feels trapped and stuck, he wants to keep Louise trapped and stuck in that life with him, so that at least he's not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why he keeps coming back to her. That's why they keep kind of this back and forth thing going. Because, well, at least we're stuck in this poverty cycle together rather than doing it by ourselves. And we're a little less poverty.
So I have a slight, well, not a slight. I think you have a very good read on Jimmy, but I always got a sense from him that he is a guy who, in his mind, is trying to do the right thing and like be the good man, the honorable guy, but he's also working on a kind of narrow definition of what that is. That's why I said I think he is someone who is trying his best.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is trying to do what he envisions as being a good partner is, but it is also ultimately not entirely what Thelma needs. And I think she kind of realizes that at the end. It's like you're trying to be a decent dude, but this just, I mean,
we're not compatible. We are ships crossing in the night.
yeah, but I've also kind of wondered, why does Louise kind of keep him around? And maybe, again, we never quite know exactly what happened to Louise. We're given enough to know that something awful happened to her. It was in Texas. And
oh boy, am I going to have some.
I know, I was going to make a joke, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to make a joke when people are dying. So, but it was enough to, I think, make her a little bit more guarded. And maybe the fact that Jimmy can't fully commit is something that she almost feels kind of safe with, because again, we don't know if Jimmy knows. So maybe for her, the fact that there is an arm's length there is something that she feels good with. I think their relationship is very interesting. It's fanfic fuel, if you will.
Mm.
But keep in mind, I haven't watched this movie extremely recently, so if I were to go back, I might have a very different view of it.
I will say that, like, one thing that struck me about Jimmy on this watch is, she calls him up and says, "Could you bring me $6,700? I'll give you all the money in my account." Just sitting there, why don't you go and look that up? Oh, that's $15,000 today.
Hang on, I'm going to go cry in a corner. But no, Liz, what I was saying is that I'm from Texas. Actually, I currently live there. So, I have some thoughts about the way Texas is portrayed. And yes.
Oh, good. I know not all Texans support this shit. In fact, I know a majority of Texans don't support that shit. So
yeah, my best friend just moved to Texas, and I know she's not super big fan of what's going on down there right now.
Well, it's also like when she talks about how you don't want to get caught in Texas shooting a man with his pants down. It's like, oh yeah, that's
yeah,
you're not wrong.
I mean, Texas has had I referenced like Marge on the Lamb a minute ago. I think it's the same episode where Bart is playing the video game where he's like a prisoner trying to escape jail, and he hits the venue change button, and they go, "Oh man, I'm in Texas," and then he immediately gets executed.
I mean, we were making those jokes when George W. Bush was on the scene.
Well, I actually went to college right across the street, literally, no fence, nothing, from where they house the death row inmates.
Oof.
Yeah.
Like, there was no fence. You could just walk up there. You could walk up to the building.
Isn't that, speaking of The Simpsons, isn't that kind of sort of the end of the PTA disbands?
Yes. It is. The Simpsons and this movie are both movies that get like an ahead of their time stamp. And like I said this on Twitter a couple days ago. Yeah, I'm still on Twitter. What about it? That the ahead of their time stamp seems to me like it's most often misapplied to movies that were satirizing stuff that was current or criticizing stuff that was current, and then we just never fixed anything.
Yeah.
And that applies to both Thelma and Louise and The Simpsons.
Well, also keeping in like one of the big subjects of this film, sexual assault, and in a little bit more kind of tangentially how the system fails sexual assault victims and survivors.
Mm-hmm.
We are 2 or 3 years out from speaking of Silence of the Lambs and Jodie Foster, more accurately, The Accused, another film which I don't think is bad, and that scene is the way it is. I understand the director's like, I wanted to horrify people. I didn't want it to be sexy. I wanted it to be violent. But that doesn't mean I ever want to watch that again. But that was another film that was about how the system just does not really help people who've been assaulted unless they are a quote unquote perfect victim. And you could kind of look at Thelma and Louise as this, like, oh, it's taking it one step further. It's not even, I'm going to go to court and fight within the system. It's, again, fuck the system. You aren't going to help me, and you never were. So I'm just going to take care of this problem myself.
Well, it sort of struck me. I started to say this before I got on a tangent, which is like rape has a very complicated history in cinema, and I feel like more graphic depictions of it were prior to the accused, really mostly relegated to kind of
Exploitation.
yeah, rape revenge films. I Spit on Your Grave, Miss 45, that kind of thing.
Hey, I said, hey, Miss 45 is great.
I this is not a judgment.
I know, just I want to defend Miss 45.
You know, I know plenty of people who will go to bat, yourself included, who will go to bat for both of those films, and I'm not even certain I would disagree with them. But the point is that like honestly, if you want to like read too much into things, which is what the fuck are we doing here if we're not going to do that?
Mhm.
This could almost be seen as like a pretty common thing that Oscar movies do. You know, take a disreputable genre and kind of like class it up. So this could almost be seen as a rape revenge movie.
Mm-hmm.
And those movies still get made. I feel, you know, we had Revenge a few years ago. We had
Revenge is great, by the way.
Revenge is great. We had Jennifer's Body a couple years ago, a decade ago, if you want to get like metaphorical about the rape. So like the genre still definitely exists, but I feel like
If you want to get really metaphorical, I mean, they've been set out now in interviews, but Maleficent.
Oh, really?
Maleficent is one of those examples where like, how do I put this?
I didn't say it was I just said that they said that in interviews, that the cutting of the wings and when she
Huh.
was drugged.
That's what kind of like struck me is like I feel like Angelina Jolie is the one who put that there because it's so much down to her acting that scene reads that way and is as effective as it is. That's not a complaint. You know, actors are artists too. They bring a lot to the table.
Yeah, I didn't say it was good, positive, bad,
Yeah, we acknowledge movies we don't necessarily like. You'll note I didn't bring up Promising Young Woman in there because that's a movie Liz and I disagree on.
You're allowed to be wrong.
I'm allowed to be wrong.
There's a movie that I'm wrong with about pretty much with everyone, and I've just come to accept it.
Well, this is the great thing about art. It is subjective, so
Yeah,
no one's ever truly wrong in a way.
truly.
Unless we're gonna say the Terrifier movies are good, then yes, you are wrong.
I mean, like I said this, you know, one part of the reason I started this podcast and why I keep the randomness angle to let me pick out movies that sometimes I haven't even heard of before, is because I do feel like no matter how good or bad a movie is, with extremely rare exception, including the Terrifier movies, I very rarely feel like I didn't get anything out of seeing this. You know, I feel like even if I didn't like it, even if I didn't think it was good, I feel like I'm a better artist and critic for every movie I see. I think the only exception I can think of off the top of my head is like whichever one of the August Underground films I saw. You know, they're all the fucking same.
Oh, I had a different expectation to come out of your mouth, Ellie.
What were you expecting? Like, run it by me.
The Mummy 2017, the one you didn't get to be on the episode for.
I feel like I am very much better critic for having seen The Mummy 2017. If nothing else, I appreciate Batman v Superman more for not being the nadir of what audiences would stomach from franchise world building in place of plot.
I truly expected that to be your. I got nothing out of this.
No, like I feel like I referenced the August Underground films there pretty specifically because those are movies without really anything happening in them except here's like, and people reference like stuff like Hostel and Saw as like torture porn movies. Like, no, those movies do have plots and characters. They might be thin, but they're there. Don't even have that.
Oh, God. At least the Mummy does technically have plot and characters. Tom Cruise is a half-formed, not even cardboard character, but he is a character.
Well, that's because Tom Cruise himself is made of cardboard. I'd say there's no soul in his eyes because there's no soul.
I just remember there's this like interview with Christian Bale where they asked him like where he modeled his performance as Patrick Bateman off of He's like, oh, Tom Cruise.
Yep.
That tracks.
Speaking of Oscars, I think Christian Bale should have won an Oscar for American Psycho.
Absolutely. Speaking of actors, let's bring it around to our actors, by the way.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, it's 100% fine. Sidetrack is what we do.
Oh yeah. Oh, and we'll get back to the actors, but I did have an old article from a Time magazine from 1991.
Ooh.
Because one of the reasons I think Thelma and Louise is still such a classic, is still watched more, and I think more so than a film like The Accused, is the person who wrote it and the person who won Best Original Screenplay was a woman, Callie Curry, who, I mean, also to give credit to Miss 45, like by all accounts, Zoe Lund or Zoe Tamarilis, I heard she went by a couple of other names. She contributed a lot to that movie, even though she wasn't credited. But this is a woman writing about assault. This is a woman writing about feeling unfulfilled in a marriage, and not that men can't write about that, but there is a little bit of an authenticity from people who might have a bit more of an experience with that. But her story is very interesting because, as she puts it, she goes, I wanted to write, as a female moviegoer, I got fed up with the passive role of women. They were never driving the story because they were never driving the car, correct? She'd worked as producing music videos, which even she kind of said, like, after a while, I just started seeing the way women were portrayed and was like, I don't like this. She tried to act when she was younger, and she's like, I can't tell you how many times I just played a prostitute. So this is someone who had experience in the entertainment industry and basically saw the same old way women were portrayed and wrote this film kind of as her own way to kind of right the wrongs of the entertainment industry, as you will. So back to the actors. Sorry.
No, it's 100% fine. And Callie Curry is an interesting person in like retrospect. You know, her second most famous movie is probably Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood, which is just one of those titles. I've never seen the movie, but it's one of those titles that I feel like everybody knows.
My mom loved the book. That's all I know about it.
Apparently, she was like one of the people in charge of the Hayden Panettiere TV show Nashville, which ran for 6 seasons while I wasn't looking.
A lot of TV for me now.
But yeah, the actors. I didn't want to bring up the actors because both Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon were nominated for Best Actress, which is extremely rare to get multiple Best Lead nominations. Usually, you'll get like multiple supporting if you're lucky.
Yeah, I think the last time it had happened was Terms of Endearment with Deborah Winger and Shirley MacLaine. I think they were both lead.
And it's interesting that this happened in the year of silence because, like, you know, it's Thelma and Louise and the movie is about them. I think there's like maybe like 10 minutes of the movie that they're not in, versus like right across the Wikipedia page, Anthony Hopkins is winning Best Actor for 15 minutes of screen time.
It's really fascinating. And like,
truly fascinating.
Well, and I think it's interesting that Jodie Foster was almost in Thelma and Louise.
And she was in The Accused.
Yes.
I think that might have been, from what I have heard, a partial reason why she didn't take it. I think the big one was Silence of the Lambs just was like, this, I need to do this. But another one was she's like, I've already played a rape victim. I've been victimized before. I don't want to play someone victimized again. And I do also get that because
it was going to be her and Michelle Pfeiffer.
I mean, hey, I would like to see that version as well, but I also understand why an actress is like, really, this is what's happening to me again? Oh my god.
And Anthony Hopkins. Who's going to turn down working with Anthony Hopkins?
Oh, Anthony Hopkins, we love you so.
I'm just saying, who would refuse to work if you're given the opportunity to work with Anthony Hopkins? You're like, bye.
It's just interesting because like one of the thoughts that sort of struck me about this movie is like before I even saw it, one of the first things that I heard, admittedly from my queer friends, is like the queer subtext of this film, and part of me wonders how much of that is just the queer actress bringing that in as a because that's just kind of what we bring to the table, and how much more that would be there if like Jodie Foster was playing the character.
Yeah. Although I do appreciate that, this is a film that I got the sense that they were platonic friends, but they just got bonded by something much deeper than friendship at that point, and it wasn't necessarily romantic love, but it's a a love that you have when you are ride or die for a person.
Yeah.
It's a trauma bond.
Well, it could be that too.
You don't have to be romantically in love for you two to be married in the end. The 90s were a good year. Especially the early 90s were a good few years for Susan Sarandon at the Oscars. Like, she was nominated for, like, what is it, this?
She won for Dead Man Walking.
She won for Dead Man Walking, which we'll get to.
Gina Davis, I believe, had already won an Oscar for The Accidental Tourist by the time this film came out, correct?
Let me check.
Christopher McDonald, when he was young, there's a comedian that he looked like, and I had to keep reminding myself that this movie was made in 91, and that it physically could not be the man who is constantly on after midnight.
There was a moment, I don't remember exactly what. Oh, it was the guy singing at the bar they go to at the beginning, and I was like looking at him, I was like, is that Matt Dillon? Who's not, but like, man, Dead Man Walking. Speaking of abusive people.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, how do I put this? Gina Davis is one of those actresses who I feel like kind of disappeared after the 90s.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Gina Davis, and I read her book not last year or the year before, Dying of Politeness.
Mm-hmm.
And she's insinuated that, we all know Hollywood is sexist. The fact that, Jennifer Lawrence was playing like a 30-something housewife when she was 25 should let you know that Hollywood has an age problem with women, and the only older actress they know is Meryl Streep. But I think Gina Davis was someone who they just didn't know what to do with her anymore, but she was also someone where she said, I didn't want to play mother roles. I didn't want to play grandma roles. So she kind of didn't shoot. I wouldn't say she shot herself in the foot, but the industry being what it was, it's like, there's a woman and she's talking and she's no longer hot and she won't take the grandma roles we're giving her.
She basically had to live out that one episode of 30 Rock.
Yeah. Well, it is really sad that there are so many, I think, phenomenal actresses. We're starting to, it's getting a little bit better now, but I also think about Sally Field, who for a while you just didn't see anywhere despite her being a phenomenal actress who won 2 Academy Awards.
Yep.
And then when she came back, she just played mom, and then she eventually, I think she got on a TV show, but it's the global. I also wonder how much of this coincides with the rise of the global market and we need to constantly pump out young, hot America. There's almost no place for older people, especially older women, because the major mainstream Hollywood industry does not view older women as interesting or even marketable, despite the fact that they all go to films too.
It was just kind of interesting to me looking over her Wikipedia page, because she was all over films from the late 80s to the early 90s. The Fly, Beetlejuice, Thelma and Louise, A League of Their Own, and then she got saddled with 2 major disappointments: Cutthroat Island, which sucks, and The Long Kiss Goodnight, which does not.
No, not Long Kiss Goodnight rules.
Long Kiss Goodnight owns. We don't deserve Shane Black.
So I finally figured out who Louise's husband looks like.
Yeah.
I've been Googling that because it's been driving me crazy. Thomas Lennon. I thought it was Thomas Lennon until I remembered it was.
Oh.
Louise's, you mean Thelma's husband?
Yeah, Thelma's. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm bad.
It's fine. It's fine.
I don't know why I get them mixed up. I shouldn't.
It's fine. It just was oh man, we haven't talked about Daryl yet. We're gonna have to talk about Daryl eventually, so we don't need to talk about Daryl. Here is Daryl in his entirety. Daryl sucks.
Daryl sucks, and Daryl, especially now where we're seeing a lot of younger men getting radicalized towards the manosphere and
that bullshit.
Yeah, conservative Christian spaces, because they're told you are owed a wife, you are owed children. I feel like Daryl is kind of the prototype of that. He just watched a bunch of YouTube videos before YouTube existed and just said, this is what a wife is. She's a domestic servant that I can fuck every now and then. Which is, so I think young men need to go watch Thelma and Louise and go, this is what's going to happen to you. If you don't treat your wife like a person, she's eventually going to leave you. She's going to leave you in a humiliating way, and hopefully she won't have to shoot a person to defend herself, but you are going to be left out on your ass.
Yeah, no, he looks like... It's so unnerving how much he looks like that man. It drove me crazy the whole movie.
It is actually a fairly who's who of people who were it's got a pretty stacked cast for such a low character count movie.
I mean, Thomas Lennon is not from 91. I keep having to remind myself, no, this movie was made in 91. He just looks like this guy from today. It sounds like him.
I have in my notes, hey, Stephen Tobolowsky. He's on the list. He's also on the list of actors. So I'm going to keep expanding. It's like him, Willem Dafoe, Paul Giamatti. Oh God, what is his name? The guy from Walk Hard.
Oh, John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly.
Whenever you see them, like, hey,
Yep.
that guy.
I am also always very delighted whenever I see Willem Dafoe or Paul Giamatti.
You're just always. I'm just always excited to see Stephen Tobolowsky. And honestly, if you need to get a guy to give a non-plus reaction shot eating a sandwich, he'll do it.
You call Tobo!
It was just wild. He's just sitting there as she is robbing the bank. Nah.
Honestly, this movie has some really great
Comedic beats.
Oh, yeah.
good cuts. A lot of very good cuts.
Like, yeah, no, it's got some great comedy moments where you're like, what?
Yeah, Tom Noble, who edited it, is like, he's a big name.
But for someone who had seen it for the first time last night, I knew of the gist of the plot. I actually knew of the end more than I knew the beginning. I knew there was a robbery, and I knew they drove off a cliff.
I mean, the driving off the cliff scene is probably the most famous part of the movie. Besides, like, I think the broad plot is reasonably famous, and this cross country fight from the law would be horrible if we didn't stick together.
Good waffles always stick together.
I truly thought the robbery was the inciting incident.
Nope.
Again, hadn't seen it, walked in blind. It's always fun when I do that. Had to pause the Matrix for 20 minutes when the big reveal happened, because I didn't know it.
I do wonder if maybe people keep that part quiet because they almost feel like, again, because rape, despite it being sadly a common occurrence, is still not something a lot of people want to watch. So I wonder if just that's why people are like, yeah, like, we don't talk about the beginning, although, I mean, that kind of sold me on it. It's like, when I was younger and heard, it's like, oh, a woman shoots a rapist and they're on the run from the law, and I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I'll watch that.
I mean, like, it's you hear that they murder their rapist, and I referenced like Ms. 45 and I Spit on Your Grave, and since there's two of them, I guess your brain might summon something a little bit more like Bais-moi.
I was about to say, are you going to reference Bais-moi?
I am going to reference Bais-moi, which is probably, if you were to like boil Thelma and Louise down to first principles and reconstruct it as an exploitation film, that's what you'd get.
Yeah.
These sure are words coming out of your mouth, Ellie.
Callie, I've known you for a little while now. I think I know what your taste and limits are. And with that in mind, don't watch Bais-moi.
I trust you enough that I wasn't going to watch it anyway. I figured you would have told me if I needed to watch it. I was just saying, I don't understand what's coming out of your mouth.
It's a very similar basic plot structure. Like, two women go on a cross-country flight from the law after I think actually both of them get sexually assaulted. It's just also it's way more hardcore about it's French.
Right.
Therefore, it is both much more sexually explicit, and also the French don't advertise this as much. They can go more hardcore on the violence than we can.
The violence doesn't bother me, actually. I don't.
You say that.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, like, audience too. Like, if you're at all squeamish, like, tell me how you felt about Irreversible, and then go see Bais-moi.
I saw Irreversible one time. Once was enough.
Yeah, once was probably too much, if I'm being real.
I mean, yeah, that too. Gaspar, no one watches Gaspar Noé film to have fun.
A few years ago, he had like a new movie in theaters. I think it was when Love was coming out. My partner and I were chatting, and he was like, "Do you want to go see this movie?" And we were like looking at it, like, "Oh, it's a Gaspar Noé film. If we go see it together, we'll probably have to break up because we won't want to look at each other."
Well, going back to, I mean, you compared it to Bais-moi and, like, the other exploitation films, I think that's another reason why Thelma and Louise endures so much, is it is able to tackle these subjects that are, frankly, kind of horrific. Again, the idea of you can be assaulted and the justice system really won't help you, but finding a way, I don't want to say to make it palatable, because I feel it sounds like I'm being condescending towards the film, and I'm not, but finding a way, I guess, to make it digestible to a very mainstream audience. Again, to kind of, we were just there was just starting to be, like, from the 70s onward, a larger conversation. It started in feminist circles and started to get more into the mainstream about how rape and sexual assault were handled by the legal system, by society, and how it was really lopsided. You know, the victim had to be the perfect victim. There's physical evidence. Were you going to be treated okay by the cops? Were you even going to be listened to? Did you get a fair lawyer?
Mm-hmm.
Thelma and Louise is a film that's kind of able to take these ideas and put them in a way where the actions of the film are fairly radical,
Mm-hmm.
but make it so, like, even, like, potentially your everyday, like, everyday person who has never read feminist theory, did not read Susan Brown Miller's Against Our Will, probably wouldn't want to think about that subject too much, but could kind of get this idea of, like, yeah, I totally get why they'd run away. Like, sympathizing with these women who felt like they were backed into a corner by an act of violence. And I think that's why it is, in its own way, despite being a mainstream film, a radical film in its own weird right.
It's so interesting that you mentioned, lawyers, justice system, and all that, because I literally just saw a TikTok today. I don't know exactly who the podcaster was, but this guy was asking a lawyer, what's like what's your biggest regret in court? And I guess he was a defense lawyer or family court lawyer or something. And he was like, it was a case I shouldn't have won.
Mm-hmm.
And he was defending a pin.
Oh.
Trigger warning. I mean, and I'm going to clarify this up front. Everyone deserves a lawyer.
I was about to say, yes, even the worst people do deserve a defense in our society.
Mm-hmm.
Lord knows TikTok comments didn't understand that. And he literally said the reason this woman lost is because he could afford a lawyer and she couldn't. She could not afford a lawyer who knew what they were doing, because they had photographic evidence of this man having beaten her up. But the lawyer was so new and didn't know what they were doing that they did not introduce the photographic evidence correctly. And the judge was not feeling polite enough or in a good mood to give them the correct verbiage to introduce the photographic evidence. And so the guy walked.
I think a good comparison point to that is it is something. I don't want to call it a movie because it's not a movie, but it is eligible for this podcast, which is the miniseries OJ Made in America.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
God only knows what I'm going to do when I roll that movie, because it's not a movie. It's a miniseries. It's like 8 episodes.
I remember. I thought that was nominated for Oscars.
It won.
One best documentary.
Ha!
I mean, it's an incredible documentary, but it's like not a movie, and they changed the rules so it couldn't happen again.
Ah.
What strikes you about that, once you have more of the, like, there's this cultural idea about O.J. Simpson as he was, and and then there was the actual thing that happened. And what struck me when you actually watch the full miniseries is, like, the LAPD were so used to just ramming people through the system who had no real ability to defend themselves. Their casework on this was hilariously sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he got away with it.
Right, and then they encountered a dude who was rich enough to afford a good lawyer and slimy enough to do whatever he had to do to stay out of jail. And that's what happened. That's basically what happened. And it's also kind of like, to bring it back around to Ridley Scott, what's kind of interesting about The Last Duel, as another Ridley Scott movie about sexual assault, where the sexual assault is the primary thing the movie turns on. The Last Duel, for people who don't know, was about the last trial by combat ever fought in France. Bring it back around to France, even.
Yeah.
Where the accuser was accusing a man of sexually assaulting his wife, and he also basically just realized, like, this dude is the king's favorite. I'm never going to get a fair trial, but I can beat him to death, and then he does.
Well,
It's presented 3 times, and what a lot of people what really started to irritate me about people analyzing the film when it came out is, the first time is from the husband's perspective, the second time is from the assailant's perspective, and the third time is from the woman's perspective. And people got really pissed, like, wait, he says that she wanted it. Why isn't that what happens in his perspective? Why? Because he knows she didn't want it, he just didn't care.
Oh my God, people can't be that. I know they can be, but
they absolutely can be. And The Last Duel is a movie that I feel like deserved a lot more credit, if for no other reason than Jodie Comer is incredible in it.
Oh, she's great. Actually, I don't think this movie's going to make my top 10 for the year, but I think she's phenomenal in The Bike Riders.
I need to see that.
I mean, there's no real bad performances in that movie, but she is putting everyone else to shame.
No, it's just so interesting because, like, the lawyer, people in the comments were like, well, why didn't the lawyer help that other person, the other lawyer?
Not his job.
He has a code of ethics.
Your job is to represent your client the best you can.
Yeah, and also, like, code of ethics dictates that if he does that, he could lose his license, his career.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it sucks. He doesn't want to. He clearly regrets that this happened. He is practically crying in this clip that we're watching. And people like, he doesn't actually regret it. He took the check to the bank.
Everyone deserves a legal defense is like one of those things. It's like being against the death penalty. It's one of those things it's one of those positions that I hold that can be emotionally difficult to maintain under stress.
Yes, but it's the right thing to do.
Right, but I can't. I don't trust. Like, I can like emotionally want an evil person to be put to death, but I also know that I can't trust the government with that power. I can emotionally want Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby to just be thrown straight to jail, but like, I don't think that could exist without causing a lot more problems. So it doesn't matter what I feel.
Absolutely.
It's actually, there's just, comedian put a post out there that was like, that they're guilty when they start putting these celebrities that are old out there in wheelchairs and making them look blind. Like, look at this fragile old man.
Well, actually, so going on the legal thing, there's a book. I have not read it. We have it at my place of employment. I don't know if I can bring myself to read it because I know I'm going to probably be heartbroken, but it was a book came out a few years ago, and it's called Is Rape a Crime? And it's a woman's memoir.
Ah, okay.
And I know that's a very incendiary title, but the reason she wrote it was to look at society and looks at the legal system and just how little rape is actually prosecuted. And that's where that title comes from, this idea of it's something that every single person will go like, oh, that's horrible, that's terrible, jail these people. However,
but then we don't.
Forget jailing, we don't even look for them. And this goes back to the other problem is the conception of what rape is, i.e., the man in the mask in the alley, is not what the reality is, which is, Ellie, I know you do not like promising young women, but the situation in Promising Young Woman that happens to the main character's friend, where she is passed out drunk at a party and people take advantage of her, that is far more common. And there is like, when I read one of the reviews of her, the book I'm talking about, they said, she almost says, I don't think our legal system has truly adjusted as to how to really prosecute a crime like that. Because we almost can't conceive of that as a crime. We conceive of that as a misunderstanding. And watching Thelma and Louise, from my perspective, from a lot of people's perspective, we would look at that and go, there was no misunderstanding there at all. She said no, it doesn't matter. She was dancing with him. No means no. But I could imagine just as many other people going like, yeah, well, she shouldn't have danced with him. She was married. She was kissing him. He just misunderstood where things were going. And again, just going back to my original thing of the reason they drove off was because they knew the world would not help them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, they are not in a world. Thelma and Louise did not live in a world where the justice system could help them. And sadly, in the real world, we don't seem to either.
Nope.
A couple of years ago, there was an album that I quite liked, Honey by Samaya. I recommend it a lot with the caveat that I understand that if you don't want to like finish it, because it is a lot of places an extremely hard listen. She is extremely raw in a lot of those songs, including a song called Breathing Song, which is about her own sexual assault. And a lot of it is really complicated because like she clearly has trouble blaming the guy, like, because she, and I don't want to speak for her except for as much as the song does, but there's a verse where she talks about speaking to one of her friends about it, and he has to be the one who says it doesn't matter what happened, like, you don't have to apologize for anything that happened after you said no. And to bring this back around to like OJ Simpson, there's a really great quote by Andrea Dworkin. Yes, I know she's not a great person. I'm not going to bat for her, but it's a good quote.
She's complicated, but I will say she was so on the goddamn money with right-wing women.
She was. That's probably my favorite work by her. And she wrote a thing about Nicole Brown Simpson that I go back to a lot. And it's a long piece, but it opens, you will never know the worst thing that happened to Nicole Brown Simpson in her marriage because she's dead and cannot tell you. And you must remember, if she told you, you wouldn't believe her.
Yep.
And like, it's kind of like where it's one of those things that kind of really distresses me because we're 30 years out from Thelma and Louise. We're 30 years out from Clarence Thomas and from O.J. Simpson trial. And I said it earlier, like if we weren't talking about Anna Kendrick's abusive boyfriend, which I haven't read that article about. I do really want to see the movie she made. We would be talking about someone else because there's always one. The Oscars are lousy with people who were either revealed to be abusers after the fact or were already known to be abusers.
Roman Polanski won an Oscar in 2003. We all knew who he was.
He did, and like what frustrates me about The Pianist, and we will one day get to it, is that it's actually a really great movie, but I can't justify that.
Oh, it is, but
Yeah.
it's one where I feel like that was I wish back then someone had just said, look, this is a great film, we'll nominate the actor, but we are not nominating this man. Although I feel like there's starting to be a little bit of a turn. I mean, when is the last time Woody Allen's been nominated for anything?
Thank God.
I know, and I feel like after Blue Jasmine came out and is it Dylan Farrow came forward with what happened to her. It was nice to see that it seemed like there was a heel turn in Hollywood, at the very least from an award standpoint of whoa, he's nowhere to be seen anymore. So
we mentioned that Susan Sarandon,
and nothing of value was lost.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned that Susan Sarandon won Best Actress 4 years later for Dead Man Walking, and like the rest of that year, Braveheart for picture and director, Mira Sorvino for Mighty Aphrodite for supporting actress,
which is a shame because she's so good in that movie.
Kevin Spacey for The Usual Suspects.
Oh, it's a first year.
Christ,
Also,
what a fucking year.
Also, you know what? You all can, whoever's listening to this can come at me. Babe should have won Best Picture that year.
You know what? I will continue to bask in my boy Nick Cage winning for.
Well, yeah.
Not actually a great performance, but I'll take it.
Was it Pig?
No.
Wasn't that?
No, it was Leaving Las Vegas.
Oh, okay.
It was actually extremely funny. Mel Gibson has a new movie coming out starring, speaking of problematic people, Mark Wahlberg.
Whoa!
Oh!
And it was extremely funny to me because I saw the trailer when I went to see Deadpool, and they flash up from the Academy Award-winning director of Braveheart. Just saying, what's his name? Who directed Braveheart? I've got my notepad right here. Who directed Braveheart trailer?
No, but like it's actually so. I keep expecting that Mel Gibson. I know who Mel Gibson is going to make his replacement in society. I'm just waiting for it to happen because I know this man, not personally, but I know him well enough that, and he's famous. He has made his views well known. So I don't give a shit if I say his name. Nathaniel Buzzalik. He is a piece of shit.
Oh,
fun.
He has already worked with Mel Gibson on that movie about the guy who wouldn't hold a gun in the army.
Oh, Hacksaw Ridge.
That fucking.
He played one of Andrew Garfield's brothers.
I'm gonna go ahead and tell Hollywood, like, no, I don't fucking want Mel Gibson back.
No.
You can. I'm aware that it turns out that canceling doesn't actually do anything to anyone, but you can just like
keep him.
You can keep him.
Yeah.
Keep him. I don't want him.
But no, like Nate's such a piece of shit. He's an asshole and he's a piece of shit.
That's actually one of the nicest things I've kind of noticed about the Mad Max fandom. They're like, oh yeah, we love the first 3 Mad Max movies. We don't need Mel Gibson back. We're fine. We're good.
Fury Road is eligible for this podcast. I won't go too far into detail.
Yes, if you don't call me for that, if you do not get me on for that.
Absolutely, Liz. I love you. Maybe, hopefully Furiosa, fingers crossed. But one of the things that kind of struck me about that is, no one really wanted Mel Gibson back, but also, like, it really fits into my interpretation that you can read the Mad Max movies as just like a series of mostly unrelated stories that people are telling, and I guess there was a crazy person. That's this mythical figure, Max.
Well, I mean, that's why those movies are so good, and I will say that they might be the best franchise, because it's just every couple of years, George Miller goes out into a desert with some cars and some weird-looking people, and then gives us a cool movie. And we're all just like, oh, cool, thanks. Oh, now you're gonna go make a really nice love story where Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton fall in love, and Idris Elba's a genie, and it's gonna make me sob at the end? Oh, okay, cool.
We don't appreciate George Miller enough.
We don't! He is up there with Martin Scorsese as, like, my cinema grandpa.
And I also really appreciate Furiosa as joining this year with Dune Part 2 as huge tentpole blockbusters that are like, congrats, hero, you won. And it sucks. And you hate it.
I don't know. I think, I mean, I would just say this. Someone killed Todd, I would totally turn that person's ass into a fucking tree.
Me too. With
Like,
any of my partners.
Spoilers for a movie that came out this year, everybody.
I'm thinking about the Thelma and Louise, and there's an author, and I'm currently reading her fictional book, but I have access to her memoir, and her name is Ella Dawson. I'm going to plug her book because I don't have any projects of my own to plug, so I've just been plugging people I like their projects.
That's fine.
They're little indie projects. I'm going to plug her fictional book, but her memoir and her life has literally been about revenge porn and, you know, all of these other horrible things that have happened to her. You know, she's been very open about it. She's written in Elle and other magazines and stuff like that about the things that have happened to her. And it's kind of like a modern, you know, you think about Thelma and Louise in the 90s and you're like, how would that play out today?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm constantly like, Ella, I will go fight somebody for you. Just give me a name and address. I'll find a pig farm.
I was
great.
I mean, I was hoping you were going to say that you wanted to see Thelma and Louise's Thunderbird in the next Fury Road movie. Instead, it just got horribly depressing.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. The movies. I joked in the Discord that I'm really excited for our December picks because
they're not depressing.
Because like the 2 November picks on our last October pick are just so fucking heavy.
Yeah.
Todd was in for the separation, which I'm like, woof, well, have fun on that.
It's a great movie, heavy as anything, and we've wandered enough off topic that I feel like
I tried to bring it back.
No, like I feel like the conversation should have hit a point where we can ask if anyone has any plugs.
I don't, but I would like to read a quote from the same article I quoted earlier about Callie Khouri, where
Absolutely.
You know, she just says, "I certainly don't hate men," which the article, this is Time Magazine in 1991. They certainly have to note that she celebrates her first year of marriage, but she says, "Most guys don't relate to the truck driver or the rapist. And if they do, their problems are bigger than this movie." And I just love her saying that. Like, yeah, if these are the people that you think are treated too harshly, your problem isn't with this film. And I do kind of love how few fucks she gives in that article. Like, a little bit later, she said that when people call about these crime films, and she says, quote, "For men, they're considered healthy fantasy. But when women are shown doing the same things, they say it's a propaganda tool. That is an absolute insult to the intellect of women. This is an adventure film. It's a film about women outlaws. People should just relax."
I mean, like, we didn't get too far in the truck driver scene because it's not like a super important or complicated scene. But, you know, it is worth pointing out, like, there is a strong argument. It's made in several things I've read about this movie, including, I think, the Criterion essays that I have in there, that this film was a Western.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, if we boil out, and I have problems with people defining everything as a Western, but if we boil out, like, the West into, like, the whole action genre, the action hero puts a shitty person in their place is, like, a staple of them. And, like, but she's right. Whenever it's a woman doing it,
it's dangerous. It's seen as dangerous.
Suddenly people realize that it's the same thing that happened with Captain Marvel a few years ago. Like, she robs a guy of his bike or whatever, and they're like, how could she? I'm like, shut the fuck up.
Well, or just to quickly say, a film like Fatal Attraction, which there's a lot of issues that you could talk about with Fatal Attraction, but this idea of a woman a guy has an affair on his wife with her, and then discards her the woman she gets inconvenient, decides, that's it, you're not going to ignore me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea of this is somehow a dangerous idea, because I think there are a lot of men who look at this stuff and go, oh shit, no, the women's are gonna get ideas.
I've got plenty of ideas.
Yeah.
Before I do my plugs, I'll do a quote as well. This is from an article that Ella Dawson wrote. Just a quick little piece here, a couple of pieces from hers. That when I publicly identify as an abuse survivor, I always brace myself for someone to ask for proof. I do not want revenge or justice or attention or clout. I just want to know what happened to me. I want to feel better. I want to heal. I won't encourage you to name your abuser publicly because that opens a whole different can of worms. But please stop censoring yourself in the privacy of your mind. Believe yourself. Believe what you already know to be true. You deserved better. It was really that bad. It counts. I am so sorry to tell you that it counts.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Callie, do you have any plugs?
You can find myself personally, Callie, on the different social medias in my Linktree bio below. I'm on Letterboxd, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Tumblr, I'm on, all sorts of social media platforms. And if you enjoyed that quote by Ella Dawson, she currently has that piece by Ella Dawson, rather. She currently has a fictional book out that is called But How Are You Really by Ella Dawson, which you can find the link to purchase it in my bio, in my Linktree bio. A burned out bisexual confronts old demons, her estranged chosen family, and the ex she maybe shouldn't have walked away from when she attends her 5-year college reunion, which she abandoned due to an abusive ex-boyfriend. So I highly recommend the book. I'm only about halfway through it, but it's a very good book. Highly recommend it. So, support. It's her debut novel. So if you could please support a debut author, we would love that.
Mm-hmm.
She's a wonderful person. I've talked with her personally. So again, it's But How Are You Really by Ella Dawson. And believe survivors, believe victims.
As always, you can find your host on Twitter, Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Medium at LSR42. You can also find me on Tumblr at Football in Tuxedos with dashes between the words. This podcast can be found on both Spotify and YouTube under the same name. If you're watching us on YouTube, please feel free to give us a like, maybe a comment so I know what I'm doing wrong or right, and mostly so the YouTube algorithm will like us. And that's it for our episode on Thelma and Louise. Thanks to both Liz and Callie for coming out. Join us next time. We return to the 70s for a sports, comedy, drama, teen coming-of-age movie thing. It's called Breaking Away. Dennis Quaid is in it. Hope to see you there.